Welcome to Fostering Godlike Sexuality at Home. Our goal here is to empower parents to teach their children to see sex in a godlike way.
My name is Brigham Elton. I'm a pornography and sexual addiction counselor who've helped thousands of people overcome even the appeal of pornography. And I'm hoping to get out in front of this and try to help parents to set up their homes to chase godlike sexuality from the beginning.
My name's Andrea, a mother of 4, and I'm learning alongside all you listeners and excited to have these discussions. Thanks for joining us. We're super excited about our episode today. We have a good friend of mine here, Meredith Ashton. She is a menstrual educator, a women's hormone health specialist. She's a birth and postpartum doula, and a great friend of mine from college. A lot of what has driven Meredith's work is just exploring her own body, understanding her own menstrual cycle, and falling in love with the divinity of her femininity, I would say. Would you say that's true, Meredith?
Yes, very well said.
Okay, awesome. So we're excited to bring you in because we want to talk a little bit more about what we want to be teaching our kids, whether that's like from the beginning, early stages of sex education and like the talk that you have with your kids and conversations that lead towards puberty, when you're going to be teaching like what is really happening in a menstrual cycle, what to look for, what to be prepared for, how to manage it. Yeah. And I think this is a layered conversation, right? When we're teaching this aspect of puberty and development.
Totally. I think we're hoping to mention the menstrual cycle, in passing many times.
Right.
Previous to getting to these later ages, where we
closer
get
to puberty.
Yeah, closer to puberty ages, But then as we get closer to puberty, right, puberty doesn't start for our kid when it starts for them. It starts when someone they perceive as their peer starts to go through puberty. That's when puberty starts for them, Yeah,
that's when they're ready for more detailed information.
Totally. And so my question is, around then, when a kid starts noticing her peers, so we'll talk about a girl, a girl notices her peers are budding or beginning to experience puberty, when would you start teaching the menstrual cycle, even just as a bird's eye view?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what you mentioned before of it's a lot of little conversations leading up to this.
Totally.
But I think a formal conversation of this is what's going to happen in your body happens before she starts her first bleed.
Yeah.
So between that 10 to 12 age is the perfect time to start that.
Yeah.
And I think it's parents' good judgment as far as maturity for their kid, because sometimes 11 and 12 is better for them because they're going to catch more and they care more about that. And I think that's when I would start the first conversation of hey, your body's going to bleed. But it's a lighter version. You're not getting into the nitty gritty because they haven't bled and they haven't started cycling, but it's kind of this is what's coming.
Yeah.
So in terms of my classes, I relate it to, right, because we have 4 different phases of our menstrual cycle, and you're going to go through all 4 phases in a menstrual month.
Totally.
And it lines up with the 4 seasons, and so I talk about it in that context.
Oh, cool. That's a cool comparison.
So it's something that they can already connect with, especially because we're in Utah and we have 4 distinct seasons.
Yeah.
So we talk about a fruit tree going through each of the 4 seasons and what that tree does in each of the seasons to explain this is your body. It's not like a light switch that's on and off. I have bleeding time and I have non-bleeding time, but you're like a tree going through the 4 seasons. So
is this something you would hit at 10, 11? You would go through the seasons and just an overview? Or is this something that is more nitty gritty?
No, that's kind of the overview of hey, you're going to start and you're going to get your period, and your body is like a tree that goes through this season. So you're going to notice that you're going to have feelings. You are going to have energy. You're going to have more energy sometimes, and you're going to have less energy sometimes. And you're going to feel like you want to spend time with friends sometimes, and may feel like you want to spend time by yourself.
Yeah.
And you're going to feel some days you feel confident, sometimes you feel like you can be on top of things, and other days where you're not, you feel like you're kind of falling behind. And the message with that is always so you can be kind to yourself because you have this cycle process going on in the background. So there's no need to beat yourself up when you have a bad day.
Totally.
And so it kind of goes to that, like, be kind to yourself because you're growing and this is what's happening in the background.
Totally.
I can see this being really helpful as parents. Like I'll talk to parents sometimes that are like their kids hasn't started menstruating yet, but it's close to that age. And it's like, oh, something must be coming because emotionally, like those highs and lows are happening. And like my kid seems like off or like not sure of like really who they are and what they're doing in life, you know, like they just don't feel quite like themselves and they don't express quite like they have in the past, you know?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's like, oh, are they going to bleed yet? Are they not? And usually happens in the next few months. But having that conversation ahead of time with the kids that like, hey, this cycle is happening in the background. And then at some point it's going to lead to like the actual start of menstruation could be really helpful, I think.
Yeah. So does that hormonal cycle exist like previous to bleeding and like how long on average?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the estrogen is the first hormone that gets turned on.
Totally.
And so they'll have estrogen cycling through their bodies. And so the estrogen makes the eggs grow or the follicles grow in the ovary. But they may not ovulate right away.
Totally.
And so you have estrogen kind of on the first half of the cycle, then you have ovulation, then you have progesterone on the second half.
Totally.
And those two balance each other out.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that wonky period of teenagers where it's like the estrogen's turned on, but they aren't quite ovulating, which can happen for like a few years.
Totally.
And so that's why teenage periods can be irregular. They can be really long. They're, you know, it's kind of this like wonky time where they're just like out of balance.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, like hormonally they are, because regular ovulation is what balances the estrogen and progesterone, kind of the two halves of the cycle.
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, and so this is kind of like as they come into like, you know, if they start their period at like 13, 14, and they start ovulating by like 15, 16, like things kind of are wonky for a few years and then they kind of like iron out.
Then they kind of settle.
And then they kind of settle, you know, and things kind of get into a rhythm. But it does take like, it may take a few years. So that's why with parents, it's like, if your teenagers' periods aren't regular, like this is where, let, you know, it's kind of like moving to a new city, like hormones have just turned on and it takes some time to like develop the pathways and like, I know my way around and I know what to do and the hormonal symphony of all the loops closing. And it's just kind of like their body's doing something new. You got to give it time and space.
Totally.
You know, pay attention to really extreme pain and, you know, really extreme symptoms. I like don't turn a blind eye to those.
Totally.
But also like it's kind of a wonky, like let it iron itself out, you know, and certainly don't jump to birth control because that, you know, shuts everything down and doesn't give, you know, the body the chance to
settle,
to develop like a mature cycle.
Yeah. I see a real big advantage is like, as you hit this 10, 11, 12 conversation, right? That like, hey, this is what's going to happen to your body, you know? And like, what a cool anchor point that I think we've talked about, Andrea, like that, like if a parent can like warn a kid about this, what an evidence that like, oh my gosh, my parents know me. And like, it can help them feel more comfortable. That's like, I'm not getting blindsided. And my parents are like, oh, well, this is normal. But my parents told me before, this is what's going to happen. It's natural.
Right.
And then it happens and they get this like, oh my goodness, like this is so natural for
Like I
me.
was prepared for this.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it also opens the door of just like, if you have any questions, like I'm here, you know, and hopefully, you know, as kids, because, you know, we're never alone when we go to the bathroom when we have like toddlers and stuff, that they've like heard about bleeding and they see like, okay, so they kind of have a frame of reference. This shouldn't be the first time that they're hearing about they're going to bleed for a couple days each month. But it does open the communication door and like, hey, I'm here if you need any help. And, you know, and then a little bit later you can talk about like supplies, like this is what you do. This is how you wear a pad. And so I actually go over all of those in my class. And sometimes they're like, oh, that's how to use a tampon. It's like, yeah, let's teach you.
Yeah.
Like there's no reason why you don't need to know this. You know?
I want to go there. There's just I have one more question about your like overview early conversation.
Yeah.
Like, would you recommend like, who has that conversation? Like, would you recommend just a mom and a daughter? Like, would you recommend like parents as a couple with the daughter? Would you recommend like hitting multiple conversations where like dad and mom are both having it? Like, what would you recommend to parents, I guess? And like, specifically, I'm kind of looking for like, what is the role of dads? But Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because I think both parents acknowledging the child feels important.
Yeah.
It's also like, how is the child going to feel the most safe?
Totally.
So there's that, and what's the dynamic and what's the relationship like between each parent?
Yeah.
I feel really strongly that like at menarche, when they get their first bleed, to like as part of the celebration, that dad writes a letter to his daughter as a way of like acknowledging, hey, I know that you started your period. I just want to celebrate that this is a beautiful thing and like acknowledge it that way.
Yeah.
So maybe
That's
if
cool.
he's not in the conversation, but he acknowledges and he knows, and, you know, mom can come in and say, like, dad knows about this too, but it might be embarrassing for the 12-year-old to be talking about her period with
Yeah.
her dad.
Totally.
But to receive that letter of just like, hey, I know, you know, and then he can put in like, these are, you know,
Yeah.
the gifts that I see in you. This is why you're special. This is why you're important. This is why this is important. So hopefully he's educated and he acknowledges that way. So it's a letter that she can read in private and just know
Totally.
like, hey, dad knows about the cycle. You know, mom knows about the cycle. So maybe it's a conversation if the family culture, you know, is such that, you know, dad's looped in and
Yeah.
he doesn't make it weird. But I think acknowledging it like at that menarche phase with a letter, I'm like,
I love that letter
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Because like when I push dads, I try to push dads to be involved before it's personal. Like if you can teach about like the scientific part of it before it's like about them, it's way less embarrassing. And like that like dad invasion doesn't feel as invading. And you can still send this message that like, as a dad, I believe this is good and healthy for your body. Because I don't want to send this message that as a dad, we think this is gross and you shouldn't talk to men.
Yeah, or like we're weird
and you
about,
shouldn't talk to me about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, or how you're feeling. So I
or
think
that we think differently of you in a negative
Totally.
way or a worried way.
yeah.
'Cause I think
and
it becomes a
that's really
distancing
healthy.
moment from their dad. Like I think that
Yeah.
menstruation
Yeah.
can create distance between a girl and their dad. And like, man, do I not want that,
Yeah.
you know, as a
Yeah.
girl dad.
I also think this is cool because, you know, if you do have dads that feel a little less confident in having like a direct conversation with a daughter that like gives that validating, like, hey, I heard that you started
the
your
letter.
period and like I'm excited for you. Like a letter gives them a chance to think about what they want to say, to write it out, and then for a daughter to be able to have and keep, you know,
Yeah,
like
how many times
oh,
is
that's
she
so
reading
cool.
that? 100?
Yeah.
Yes,
You know?
yes. And it just validates her and, you know, and why she's important to him.
Yeah.
You know?
And you're right because like you know, their first bleed, who knows if dad's around, right? Like it's going to
Totally.
happen in a moment where who's there to address it. It just depends on who's there, right? Who's there to
Yeah, because it could happen,
have that
you know,
conversation.
in between classes in middle school. That's what
Yeah.
mine was, you know, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Totally.
I think this is it, you know, and
Yeah.
so
So we have this like overall combo, right? And probably part of that overall combo is a little preparation for like, hey, this is coming. Are we like giving any supplies to like for a daughter to have for her first bleed? Or is this just like, hey, this might be coming? Or are we like trying to arm them with ways to handle it?
yeah, I think in that conversation, like, it's like, hey, there's also like menstrual products, you know, and that kind of gets more into the nitty gritty of like how to manage the blood flow.
Totally.
You know, and so I think like as a parent, as a female parent, where I'm coming in, I'm like, you know, like this is where I keep mine and here's how to use them. But I think like part of the gifting, you know, with a menarche is like, here are your own supplies.
Yeah.
And so that can be part of like a gift as part of like the celebration.
Okay.
But I think like having a little like packet with, you know, pads in there
basic.
starting, you know, with the school year or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just like, remember how we talked about this is like, because like you might start your period anytime.
Yeah.
And so here's to be prepared. I think like having that kind of empowerment of like, when your bleed starts, here's what you do. And then they like, you know, if they are at school or if they're away from the parent, then they come back and the parent's like, okay, now that you've started, let's get you all set up and prepared. But that first bleed, like they're empowered and they're prepared for like
Totally.
that moment.
that moment. Yeah.
So what's in
Yeah.
that bag? So like just as a dad, like are we talking like a pad, an extra pair of underwear, like
Yes, extra pair of underwear, a pad, maybe a panty liner, and maybe a sticker
okay.
that has like some good like you got this girl or something on it like that where it's just
a
like
lollipop.
you know, yeah, and a piece of chocolate. I don't know, chocolate's gonna melt. Yeah, maybe a piece
Yeah.
of candy or
and then
something.
they can just throw it in their locker.
Yeah, they keep it in their backpack, right? Like that's
Yeah.
your like emergency preparedness. And then once they have their first bleed, then you can do kind of a celebratory gift
Totally.
and do the letter and like kind of
Explore more of like,
explore more of like,
these are some
this
different
happened,
ways.
you know, and like, you know, flowers on the day of, you know,
Yeah,
it's like, hey, I heard
totally.
you started your period, here's your flowers, you
Yeah.
know, and
I love that
so you
celebration
kind of
idea.
like, you know, you celebrate it
Totally.
because I don't know if you want to like go deeper, but like, you know, the menstrual cycle is like a tool for us to discover who we are
Totally.
and our purpose. And so like menarche and the first bleed like marks this girl stepping like her first steps on that path.
Yeah.
Like that's why
Totally.
it's a reason to celebrate. It's like
And honestly, other cultures are phenomenal at that celebration.
Yeah,
just
it's a
like,
rite-
It's
it's a rite
our
of
Puritan
passage.
culture that's a little bit like hidden, where everyone
Yes.
else is
Yeah.
like, all right, let's throw a freaking party,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
or maybe jump off a cliff and hit your head on the earth or whatever when they hit puberty, you know, if you're in
Yeah.
some like South American country, but just like
oh jeez.
celebrate it, you know. And I love that
Yeah.
idea that like this is a time of celebration, you know.
So this could be a cool discussion for partners to have. Like, how was the first period celebrated or ignored or shut away in our homes?
Yeah.
You know, mom and dad version, and then like, how do we want it to be in our home?
Yeah.
And if it's
Yeah.
like past that, if you have kids that are kind of past that, like you can still turn back and send that message.
Yeah.
You know.
Totally.
And I think sometimes that comes from sharing your own experience. Like, hey, you know, this was my experience. And so, like, when you had your period, we didn't really do a lot. But also, like, looking back, I wish we would have celebrated it more. And, like,
Yeah.
I think that could be a cool thing for you to do with your kids if you want to, you know,
Yeah, I
like kind of
love that.
pushing that forward in your family.
Yeah. And maybe sitting down and like having the conversation, right? And then, you know, depending on the age, then you wrap in like sexuality pieces and other pieces too. It's just like, here's what your cycle's doing
Yeah.
now in this phase. And this is how these other layers kind of contribute. And so it is kind of like, you know, it's best as like an ongoing conversation, obviously, just like
Yeah,
sexuality
totally.
is. But
Yeah, because, like, once they do start that bleed, there are going to be more conversations about, like, how often are you having a period, you know? And, like,
Yeah.
are you comfortable with, do you want to try using a tampon? Do you need different types of supplies?
and do you need to use a tampon because
Yeah.
you got to go to ballet class,
Yeah,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Like you got to go to swim team,
Yeah.
you know, and let's make sure you're prepared. So being aware of like, it's giving them the tools and the education to be able to manage it while they're still getting the hang of it and teaching them how to track, because that will give you as the parent really good information. Here's the thing, like it feels like it's the wild, wild west, but I'm like, it's a cycle. You come back around to the same things. Like, you know, it's going to be winter again. So if you're surprised when it snows during January, it's like, you don't have to be surprised anymore. You know what to expect. And so it can become more predictable. And then that whole thing about like women are crazy and just unpredictable and these wild creatures.
PMS,
It's like,
yeah.
it's like, actually it's like predictable, but you just have to track it,
Totally.
right? Then you can find the rhythm.
Yeah, totally. And then like when you find the rhythm, it becomes easier, constant. Like you feel more comfortable in your own skin. And
Yeah. And so part of like managing the menstrual cycle is like learning how to use their energy during each of the 4 phases, right? Because they're going to have low energy phases and they're going to have high energy phases, and their activities and their food and their exercise can kind of sync up, and that's how they learn to manage their cycle.
Yeah.
And that's part of like personal responsibility.
That's like one of my favorite things about the way that you teach the menstrual cycle. And I think it would be cool to maybe we could get some links from you for like where parents could go if they want to learn how to teach the cycle more than just like you have that once a month where you bleed, but just like the overall
Yeah.
ways to know yourself through your cycle.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's go through managing a cycle. So like let's start with the bleed. You know, like when you're teaching someone to manage a bleed, are you going like tampons, pads, menstrual cups? Like what do you typically teach?
Yeah.
Those 3, or do you not hit menstrual cups yet?
So in my classes, usually they're group classes, and I go through like all of them. So pads
Totally.
and tampons and cups and discs and period panties and
Totally.
reusable pads and, you know, throw in the like, you know, look for 100% cotton,
Yeah.
you know, and if you get a rash down there, change your menstrual products and,
Totally.
you know.
Trying to keep
and
that
so-
vagina healthy.
Yeah, exactly. So there's that part of like managing the flow, but then there's like the layer of like nutrition, like how to take care of your body. This is the time where your body needs to rest. It's
Totally.
doing a big project. and a big process of like shedding the lining. It's
Totally.
an inflammatory process. And so as much as we can like nourish your body with like really warm foods, like really nourishing like soups and like broths and things like that are just going to like pack the nourishment in that are like easy to digest, it's easy on the body. So it creates
So is
more
that, are we
rest in
pushing
the body.
iron right then because of blood
Yeah,
loss?
if you
or?
want iron. So
Okay.
like red meat is really good
Okay.
during this time, kidney beans,
Okay.
things like that. So I go through also like a food chart,
Yeah.
right? Of like, here's how to eat for each phase of your cycle that comes from Elisa Vitti, who's
Okay.
a women's health specialist in New York.
That's awesome.
And I love using that food chart. So I share her chart. So that can give you some direction of food. And that's something that like we as parents can do mindfully, right? Is like we can incorporate some of those foods in the family dinners, you know, and if the female parent's aware, like she's syncing with her cycle. And
Yeah.
so she can also like, so again, these are like small conversations that happen. And also like, it's giving permission of like what to do during this phase is to rest and like reflect and to connect spiritually.
Yeah.
This is the most spiritual time of the whole cycle is this time. So it's time to journal and it's time for especially teenagers, like take a nap. Like
Yeah.
that's your
Yeah.
exercise for these couple days that you're bleeding.
Totally.
You know, and permission to have your alone time and, you know, go take a bath and
Yeah.
you know, this is the rest and reflect time as much as possible.
So is this fall in
This
your
is the bleed.
seasons?
This is inner winter.
Okay.
This is inner winter. So if you think about a tree in inner winter,
Yeah.
it's very bare. Everything above ground would suggest that it's dead.
Yeah.
And what is it nourishing? It's nourishing its roots,
Totally.
right? Which is an important part of the process for a tree to grow and
Bloom
produce
and-
more
yeah.
produce more fruit when it's
Totally.
summertime and so this is really like a rooting time,
Mm.
you know, and so that's why it's like on the surface it's like she's doing her work by resting and reflecting,
Okay.
you know, so it's like a really good check-in with themselves.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so we're like, some practical skills we're teaching here are like how to handle the bleed,
Mm-hmm.
nourishment. Obviously, like overarching this is tracking, you know, like how
Yeah.
to track.
How to
you know.
track, how to
Yeah.
track.
And we track pretty much based on bleed, correct?
Yeah, you track the bleed, but I have like a tracking chart and I'll send a link, but
Okay.
I also have like a pie chart
Okay.
on paper. And so it has 30 slices for 30 days of the month, of the menstrual month. And every day have them chart their feelings, their top 3 dominant feelings of that day. So that's where you track the emotional journey around the menstrual month,
Yeah.
because that's just equally as important as like when you bleed.
Totally.
So
I
you're
can
gonna track,
prepare
like-
them so well.
Yeah, so you're tracking like the physical symptoms of the bleed and the flow and how long. And, you know, I had a headache and I felt bloated and, you know, all the symptoms and stuff. But then you have this emotional tracking of like how I felt
Yeah.
in this. And that goes more to the heart of like taking responsibility for like, how do I experience my inner winter? You know, what does it feel like inside my body? Do I just feel really sad?
Yeah.
You know, do I just feel kind of like hopeless, you
Spent.
know, or,
Yeah.
you know, spent, or I ran out of energy, or,
Yeah.
you know, so they're starting to build that awareness inside themselves. Like that's what menstrual cycle awareness is all about.
Totally. And how useful later, like 6 months later, where she's like, I just feel off. And it's like, okay, well, like, we can go back, track your last bleed. Like you're on day 15. Let's look at where 15 was
Yes.
6 months ago emotionally. Like, and just be
Yes.
like, oh, because a lot of times puberty comes down so often to like, who am I? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like, do I fit?
Why is this happening?
Yeah. And this like self-questioning
Yes.
is a huge part of puberty. And the more we can get like settle the self-questioning by seeing the cycle, right? The safer someone's going to
Yes.
feel in their body. And like the goal for me is that my daughter feels confident within her body. Like that's like the dream.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
And like if an emotional chart, which I do not want to fill that out, I can already tell, and we're not even close. I'm 5 years away from this at least.
No, you're
You
not
know?
filling it out. She's filling it out.
I know, but obviously a parent's going to have to help make that happen. You know, I would think.
No.
You don't think so?
No. This is her responsibility. Like, give her the responsibility for her cycle. And you talk about how important it is. And be like, if you ever feel off, like, come back to, like, what day of your cycle are you on?
Yeah.
Like,
if she
that is
doesn't-
her responsibility. If she decides not to track, like,
guess that's
that's
her
on
thing.
her. Don't do it for her.
But I just love this, like, I help my daughter feel confident in her body you know? Like, if she can learn her rhythm, like, her ability to feel confident in herself is going to increase dramatically.
And if you as a parent can remind them that there's a rhythm, like, hey, pay attention, notice.
Yeah, see
even
your
if you
rhythm.
haven't gone through the chart
Yeah.
and filled it out, like, oh, like, do you remember feeling this at another, you know, a different month during your cycle, you know? And I can see, too, how it could be a little tricky for when the cycle's really irregular. You know, if they go 2 or 3 months without a period, then sometimes it does feel like you're just tracking the bleed, you know, and everything else feels a little out of whack. But I think even just helping them pay attention and reminding them that a cycle is developing and that whatever they're experiencing is okay. And as they pay attention to it and just notice it, then they can feel that like settled in the cycle.
Totally.
Yeah.
Feeling.
So it takes like education from the parents to know kind of like what's happening biologically through the seasons. And then it's really easy to just say like, what day of your cycle are you on? So you count the days.
Yeah.
And then you kind of know as a parent, you're like, okay, she's in her luteal phase, like she's like PMSing, and like it's like all that makes sense. And then you'd be like, yeah, it sounds like, okay, what day are you? Oh, you're on day 26. Okay.
Yeah.
You probably need a little bit more space to yourself today. Would you like some more space?
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you give the grace, and so much of, like you mentioned it, of just like questioning who they are. And it's just like, nothing's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You're just a cyclical being. And this is what that means.
Totally. Welcome
And
to the
so-
cycles that the earth, the world, all of us have.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So it leads to that like self-kindness, and, you know, can bust those expectations of like, I should be able to do this or be this because I could do that last week. And it's like, but you're biologically a different person this week, you know,
Totally.
because you're changing every day.
Totally.
So
Okay, so do you have any recommendations for what you think parents should like suggest to their kids as like a first way to manage their period? Right? If you give them all the options, you're teaching them like, hey, there's all these different ways, whether it's a menstrual cup or a pad or a tampon. What do you professionally like suggest as a starter?
Yeah, really good question. I feel like start with a pad. There are like the disposable pads that we see, and there's reusable pads. So sometimes it's a comfort thing. You know, of course, if there's like any rashes and stuff, switch to 100% cotton, and that can solve things. But a pad gives them a chance to like see their flow and start to know what is a heavy day for me, what's a medium day, what's a light day, which goes into the tracking, which is really important information.
Yeah.
So it's like explaining that, but also like they are like uncomfortable, right? Like, you know, for some.
Yeah.
And sometimes like sports, there's a need for tampon usage. And so then it's like, okay, if this is where knowing your child is really useful. It's like, hey, they've got to go to dance class, they've got swim team, you know, let me teach you how to use a tampon. So that may come sooner for some if there's a sport or a swimming or, you know, a reason where it's like, okay, I'm on my period, but I want to go boating, you know,
Totally.
I'm on my period, but I need to go to dance class. And so I think like showing them, so in my classes, we go through all of the options, and it's always like, you get to pick and find the product that works the best for you, but start with a basic pad and have like a couple of pads in a little bag, you know, around like before they start bleeding, and that's their preparation.
Totally.
Once they have a pad, it's like, okay, then, you know, and they start cycling, like then you start to just layer in whenever they're ready or need to about the different products. But I would say start with a pad first.
That's helpful. I want to come back to the classes that you teach, but just like as a side note, like I think it's important that this doesn't become just a female education. Like, I mean, like I don't have any boys, sadly, but like if I had a boy, like I think it's important for them to know and have some menstrual information, because I think when boys learn about the menstrual cycle, it becomes less of this like thing, and is now just like, okay, this is what it is. You know? And so, like, what information do you think a 16 to 8-year-old boy should have about the menstrual cycle from a parent?
Honestly, like, it's the same. Like, the seasons, because that's already something that they can get, and that's like really neutral ground.
Totally.
And so talking about it in that context is like, this is what's happening in women. That is why they seem unpredictable. This is why they feel snappy one day and they're like so gentle another day.
Totally.
You know, and as a female parent, it's just like, you know, the code word in our house is like, I'm going to turn into a bear.
Yeah.
You know, we just need to cooperate, you know, and I'm bleeding, so I need to take it easy today. Please, you know, be gentle with me. So it's that kind of language where, you know, if they've grown up with that in the home, that can be useful. But honestly, it's the same kind of education of like, here's what they're experiencing. And this is why it's sometimes hard. This is what PMS is. So when you hear like I'm PMSing, like this is what it is. These are the symptoms.
I think a lot of times boys are kind of taught that like PMS is a way to like dismiss female emotion and expression.
Yeah.
And so how would you kind of try and counter that message?
I mean, it's like, this is what PMS is. It's having these symptoms like 3 to 5 days before you bleed. That's what it is.
Totally.
And so explaining like culturally, we kind of use this term. It's like just like acknowledging and calling it out. It's like culturally we use this term to kind of dismiss, but that's not like, I mean, scientifically accurate, but
yeah, it's just a magnifying glass.
And so don't ever use that with women. Like, don't just use that as an excuse. Like, that's really degrading. Totally. So it's like a talk about respecting women. And from a spiritual perspective, it's like, here's the broader thing about why women have a cycle. Yeah. Yes, it's on the fertility and the, you know, facilitates babies coming, but it's actually a spiritual process of like how we're supposed to find our purpose.
Rebirth.
Yes. Yeah. And this is why it's difficult, and this is why it's challenging, and this is why it's really special. So it's actually something to be really respected. And you can do that. And here's language. You can ask your female friends what day of their cycle they're on. And that's kind of a neutral question. And if they know and they can tell their male friends, it's like, how useful is that? If they kind of know the days and they kind of know it's like knowing the lay of the land. It's just like, oh, I know where you are.
Yeah.
Is there anything I can do to help you today? Like, how kind is that? And maybe a lot to ask for teenage boys, but if they have the information, you know, and the guidance to be respectful about it and how to ask the question, how to broach the subject, right? You don't just say like, are you PMSing today? It's like, what day of your cycle are you on?
Yeah.
You know,
or
just
even
swap the question.
would you just like, maybe they would even feel more comfortable leaning into like, hey, how are you feeling today? And then like, what are your thoughts or what's important to you? You know, if a guy friend or a boyfriend or whatever could ask those types of questions and actually believe that what the female friend was saying mattered, you know, like, hey, lean into what she is feeling and thinking and prioritizing right now, you know?
Yeah, I think closer relationships is probably like what day of your cycle on. Otherwise, like loose friends are just like, hey, are you okay today?
Yeah.
You know, and hopefully women are more forthcoming with like, you know, if it is cycle related, just be like, oh, I'm about to bleed and I'm just kind of falling apart today.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But
I got this advice once that I love that just like PMS is like a magnifying glass. Like the emotions behind it aren't fake. They're just bigger. And like sometimes magnifying glasses are awesome things to work on to like help your relationship grow. You know, and like you need a magnifying glass to improve things sometimes, you know, and like this is an awesome time to look like maybe a little deeper into some like emotional, even like hardships that can exist in a partnership.
I remember you telling me this, Meredith, once, this exact same principle. And like this idea that, hey, whatever's going on, it's your body's way of telling you that it matters and it's important. And that at other times of the month, it's easy to overlook and set aside. But at this time of the month, it's your body's way of saying this is important. Take some time to look at it, to discuss it with your partner, to explore where the needs are.
Yeah, you nailed it. Like that is the purpose of PMS. It puts a magnifying glass so that it's like it hurts bad enough that maybe you'll change it and you'll address it because it is so important. Mm-hmm. So like there's, again, divine reason for it. It's not just some willy-nilly thing that happens, but there is divine.
So I know you offer some of these things, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you offer. But like, what do you offer so that we can, like, parents that like maybe feel a little uneducated, like how can I get some information, like as a dad, or as or as a mom, like how can I learn more about myself or my daughter? Like, what are some options that people have?
Yeah, so I teach cycle awareness classes, and it's kind of like I teach them for like parents and teens, like adult women, for adult men, for teenage boys and their dads. Like it's kind of any combination of parents and teenagers, and then adults as well.
Is it kind of like a la carte? Like people would request a class?
Yeah, so typically somebody would come and like, I want to host a class. It's like, okay, great. Gather who you want to gather. Let's talk about your group. So maybe it's adult men, or maybe it's men and their teenage boys. Okay, so let's talk about what the needs are. Let's kind of curate the curriculum. But there's a pretty like similar
lane.
Way, like it's like the class is the same no matter who I'm teaching it to, but we're gonna like cater it and talk specifically for who the audience is.
And this class is like, is it a multiple week? Is it like an hour? Like,
it's usually like a 2.5 hour class.
Okay.
So
like a little workshop.
Yeah, it's a workshop. Yeah.
Okay.
So plan for 3 hours, and I bring all the materials. So whoever wants to host the class, they'll gather their people, and I show up and teach, and we kind of workshop through the cycle. And
what an awesome thing. Like, I honestly, like, I feel very educated, honestly, in this lane, but like, I would love that, just as like a way to like not me opening all the doors, to just like sit there next to my daughter and hold her hand and learn this stuff, you know, and then like have this door open that like I can be like, hey, remember that, you know, even if it's, hey, remember that, I actually don't agree with that, you know, like it still is a phenomenal door opener that as a parent, I don't have to always be the one prying.
Like,
on
hey,
the crowbar,
we're going to have this
yes,
conversation.
and that's like the purpose. I'm like, the purpose is to just open the door and give you a context and give you like some kind of frame of reference that you can come back to, that you can now go have your conversations in your own home. Like that's the goal. Because my class is like introductory. It's like, let's talk basics about the cycle and what's happening, but on all the layers, like physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Like we cover all those layers.
So what age would you recommend, like, if like I'm going to bring my daughters through this course, like what age would you kind of aim, do you think is best?
Usually 11 to 12 to start.
Okay.
And so I've done kind of mixed groups where like moms will get together and their kids are, you know, between 11 and 15, you know, and so it's kind of a mixed bag as far as the girls, or sometimes they're concentrated more of, you know, younger or older. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
It is a great class. I had the chance to sit in on one
it's
and
so fun.
host one, and it was really fun. And I had great feedback from moms that were like, I'm so glad we had the opportunity to have this conversation and open this door in a bigger way, I guess, you know, rather than just in passing, like, oh, here's my duty as your mom to make sure you know about this, and here's your bag of stuff. It was a little bit more exciting, I guess. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I'm so grateful for you coming in and letting us question you down.
Oh my gosh, this
thanks,
is so
Mare.
fun.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
we'll have some links at the bottom of the podcast in the description that we can go to, like your website or things that you have, a way that people can sign up a class. But yeah, we're just so grateful because I think this is a really a way to empower parents to become their kids' primary sexual educator, which includes menstruation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big part. Thanks for joining us for this discussion today. We hope it was valuable for you and your families. Our website, trueconnectionsrecovery.com, has a bunch of resources that you can access to get support from us.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways we're trying to help individuals, right? Whether it's through like individual recovery, like partner support, even like parental support, like how can I set my home up as a place for success?
Yep. We will be putting like technology management resources, other educational tools, or like workshops that might be up and coming in the area.
Just trying to provide ways for like families to feel supported, right? And so all of that you can find there on that website.
The more that this gets shared, and like as you talk about it with others that you know, like the discussions kind of flow, and we can all grow in this area together.
Yeah, we really succeed as a community.
Yep.
Thank you.